But that's not where we are today. We're here with Mr. Trump, President Trump. And, Madam President, you know, on January 6th, I sat outside and listened to the president. I really thought, you know, I'm going to go in and give a speech that night. I had no idea what was going to happen to us. I thought I was just going to speak on the floor that night. I thought that was it. I had no idea that we were going to face an insurrection. So I was taking notes. I thought, I'm going to give this speech. Well, as it turned out, didn't get to give that speech. We had kind of a truncated session that night. We gave a few speeches, a few people talked, but we didn't give a big speech. So I've been waiting to give this speech for a long time. I've been waiting to refutate what the president said at his rally for a long time. And the reason is because I cannot stand to have our election system, the basis of our democracy, the basis of our country, why we're the gold standard around the world. I'm not sure anybody should go on a codel anymore to witness an election in another country until we get our election system right here. What are you going to say when you get there? What are you going to say if you're going to go to another country and witness their election? We know how to do it in the United States, because right now we're not proving that. We're showing that we can't move forward on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But let's go over what President Trump said that night. Because President Trump claimed that, his first claim, that the Michigan Secretary of State flooded the state with unsolicited mail-in ballots sent to everybody on the rolls in direct violation of state law. That's what he said that's what he said. That's what he said at his rally. That's what he said. Go down there. Go down there. You know, there's moments in this craziness. There's moments in this craziness when you realize there are people who will stand up. And I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. But I was probably the last person to leave this chamber. And the parliamentarian refused to let anyone touch the ballots. Even though she could barely walk down the hall, even though she could barely carry all those supplies, she knew that allowing anybody else to touch those certifications of the election would give somebody the claim that somehow somebody had interfered. So people were doing their job. And in this case, the Secretary of State, in response to a 2018 vote by the people of Michigan, they approved, in a vote by the people, a no-excuse absentee voting law. That's what the people of Michigan voted for. So the Secretary of State sent out ballots. Some people didn't like that. Some people challenged it. And in September of 2020, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld the decision that the Secretary of State, citing the Constitution and their authority over elections, that they had the authority to mail those ballots. The Supreme Court of Michigan didn't take up that case. They didn't refute it. So it's false. He's trying to say mail-in ballot applications were illegally sent. It's not true. The people voted for it. The Secretary of State did her job. The courts upheld it. He tried to say 17,000 ballots were cast by deceased voters. Okay, I mean, to say nothing of the fact that there are probably a lot of people with the name of John Brown in Michigan. Like, there's lots of people by the same name. But there is a system that uses the Social Security Administration to flag death of deceased voters. And ballots in this case who have died are not counted in the Michigan election. In the state of Washington, if you cast a ballot and you mailed it and you died 2 days later and the election's not till the next week, your vote counts. Now, you can't mail it, your spouse can't mail it after you die and say, my wife intended to vote for so-and-so. No, no, no. But once you vote, once you fill the ballot out, and you put it in the mailbox or a ballot box, your vote is good even if you die the next day. That's our state. In Michigan, no. So they did not do this. They did not have this claim that the president had. And then he claimed the turnout in Wayne County was 137% of registered voters, or 139%, somewhere in there. Also not true. In Wayne County, it was 61% of the vote of more than 1.4 million registered voters. So all that he said about Michigan that night was false. It was false. And the courts upheld it. And it was just a big lie. Let's go to the president's state. Let's go to Wisconsin. Trump claimed 170,000 absentee ballots were counted without a valid absentee ballot application. Now, the president knows that your state is infamous, famous, appreciated for same-day voting. And in Milwaukee and Dane counties, a total of 170,000 people did vote absentee ballot in person in the 2020 election. They filled out an absentee ballot application, located it on the envelope like I showed, and sent in the ballot. So they know who those people are. They know that they were legitimate voters. They didn't vote without an application. They filled out the application as well. So this, too, is part of the big lie. And then Trump claimed that 100,000 ballots were backdated by U.S. postal workers. That's what he claimed. The U.S. Postal Service Inspector General investigation to the allegations and all of the USPS workers and contractors refuted these allegations. There was no evidence. There was no evidence. There was no evidence that this occurred. And then the famous thing that the other side of the aisle constantly talks about, which I don't understand, ballot harvesting. They think that somehow this is going to lead to ballot harvesting. So Donald Trump claimed that Madison had 19,000 ballots were collected by human drop boxes. I don't even know what box is. I don't even know what he means by a human drop box or operatives. Well, facing an influx, Madison and the city clerk held a pair of events in which people could go to a park and drop off their absentee ballots at stations set up and staffed by poll workers. What is wrong with us if we're trying to make it harder to vote in America? What is the premise? If the premise is you want to certify that people are actual citizens of the United States, great, we have a system. If you want to certify they live there, great, we have a system. We have a fine, we have a penalty, we have a way to investigate them, we have a way to catch fraud. So what is it? You just want to make it harder to vote? No, no, no. Democracies are about enfranchising the vote. It's a constant effort. The same things we did in 1920 don't apply in 2020. In 2020, it's an information age, and we had a pandemic. What is wrong with making the vote available to people? So the ballot harvesting that he claims did not happen. That's also part of his speech that night. He went on for 45 minutes. He went on for 45 minutes whipping people up to come down here and attack the Capitol based on these lies that weren't true. Big lies that weren't true. Then he went on to Georgia. He claimed over 10,000 ballots in Georgia were cast by individuals whose names and birth dates matched Georgia residents who died in 2020 prior to the election. He later revised that down. He was like, oh, wait, no, that's too high. He said it was 5,000. And the State of Election Board in Georgia conducted a comprehensive investigation of deceased voters submitting ballots and found 4 cases. 4 cases. 4 cases. Again, I don't know what Georgia's law is. I don't know if it's like Washington. I don't know if it's like Michigan's. I don't know what it's like, but they found 4 people. So it wasn't 5,000. It wasn't 10,000. Trump claimed that there were 66,000 people that were under the age of 18 who voted. I think this has gotten a lot of attention because I think there's been some public accounting of this in the press. I think the Secretary of State refuted this several times. But in general, the Secretary of State said that there were 0 individuals under the 18 who voted in the election based on a comparison of people who voted in the 2020 election in Georgia to their full birthdays. So that also was refuted. And then Trump claimed, I showed you that attestation on the Washington ballot, the certification that you have to sign, what it says. Can't vote if you're incarcerated or a felon. So Trump claimed that there were 2,500 ballots cast in Georgia by individual names and birth dates that match incarcerated felons in Georgia prison. So there was no mass incarcerated voting of felons. They did investigate and did find 74 potential felons who they think could have cast a ballot. And guess what happened? They pulled them, so they weren't counted. That's how the system works. That's how the system works. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why you have the system. So just like the other states, no, those voter claims were false. Okay, let's go to Arizona. Also another claim. He's made a lot of claims since then, but I'm just focusing on the ones mostly from that evening because that's what sent people down here, and now that's what sent us on where we are with candidates all across America pledging Trump-think to run for office, which is undermining our election system and undermining our democracy. And all I want is our colleagues to work together on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That's all I want. Like, this can't be more tumultuous than 1965. Well, I'm not saying that he isn't, the former president isn't stirring up a lot. He is, but I got to believe that we can work together. So he said 36,000 ballots were illegally cast by non-citizens. Madam President, why am I going through this? Because I get a little tired of everybody just saying, oh, the courts decided, he was wrong, the courts decided, he was wrong. No, no, no. People need to have faith in this system. We need to work to build faith in this system. We need to work in a bipartisan fashion to build faith in this system. And we need to stop the discrepancies between states. 2020 turnout in Washington for the presidential, 84%. Alaska, 60%. West Virginia, 63%. Georgia, 66%. Wisconsin, 72. I don't know. I think it's probably a little higher. I don't know. Pre-clearance was based on that there was 20% difference in states voting. That 20% difference still exists today. How are we working to protect our democracy and enhance voting rights if we're here trying to suppress those rights through these various state actions? So in Arizona, the president said 36,000 ballots were illegally cast by non-citizens. Well, I showed you that attestation that you have to sign that basically says you're going to jail or you're going to be deported or you're going to pay a fine. And in Arizona, the Supreme Court basically had previously struck down a law requiring that proof. And so they did submit proof of their application. They do submit and attest to their citizenship. So they do attest to their citizenship, and since then, Arizona has further enhanced their laws. 22,000 ballots were returned that were scheduled to be mailed out. I love this all the time. I love this all the time, like this notion that somehow somebody leaked a bunch of ballots as if they all don't have a barcode on them. They all have a barcode on them, that you know where they are, they have a number attached to them. But because we have so many people who vote overseas or who vote even here in the Washington, D.C. area, some of my staff here get a ballot earlier than I would get a ballot at my home in Edmonds, Washington. And the reason is because they know that they live here and it takes them a long time to get the ballot and get it back to the Secretary of State. So they were probably referring to ballots that were being mailed out. The claim was really just a misreading of data, that parties that mailed in the ballot on the first day, that literally could have been overseas ballots before the ballots actually went out because a previous batch of ballots were already sent. There was a claim that there were more than 11,000 ballots cast, the numbers of registered voters in the same state. In the 2020 election, the Secretary of State reported 3.4 million votes were cast out of 4.3 million registered voters for a turnout of 79%. So there weren't more, there might have been at some moment. I mean, one of the things that you see in close elections, particularly in our state, because it takes a long time to count vote by mail, because again, you're doing the verification of signatures, is counties will list how many ballots that they have left. No county ever overestimates how many ballots they have. They don't know because you're still getting them in because of the vote by mail. Nobody says they have more ballots than they do, because then everybody's going to say, where are those ballots? So people underestimate the number of ballots, and the consequence is you have different numbers that come in every day. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with the system. The system, again, based on your signature, on your registration, on your attestation. Again, it's not to say that there won't be less, than a decimal percent of 1% fraud. There will be some things that happen, but it's not pervasive to the system, and there is a way to catch them, there was a way to penalize them. And 150,000 voters were registered in Maricopa County without voter registration deadline after the deadline had passed. And a federal judge, basically in that case, cited the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there were 20,000 ballots that basically were registered after October 5th. So the court legally extended that deadline because of COVID-19. So the notion that these were all illegal, you may not have liked the court decision. I know the former president doesn't like the court decision, but these are what the courts decided in these cases. These are what voters decided. These are what states decided. He just doesn't like the outcome of this system. And the reason why we're here today on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and to try to pass these laws is because our country, based on a democracy, knows that enfranchisement, voter enfranchisement, is something that we have to constantly be working for. I talked about a couple of companies earlier